Hello, it is March 27th, 2024. My name is Alyssa Knappen. I'm here with
Lauren Manso.
And we are interviewing
Britt Dixon.
Would you spell your name out for us?
Brittdixon.
Fantastic. So tell me where and when you were born and how you identify.
I was born in Orlando, Florida, in the year 2000. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as a woman. I am a trans woman.
Beautiful. So talk a little bit about your upbringing and how it influenced your identity and your expressions of it.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is my sisters. I have 3 older sisters. The oldest is a decade older than me, and then the youngest is 2 years older than me. I'm the baby, so I feel like that defined a lot of growing up was being around feminine presence. My dad worked the night shift when I was very little, and still, he worked less of the night shift later in life, but for most of my life, I was just around the girls and my mom, and I think part of like very early in my life, just always being around feminine things, it took a while for me to like gain that like perspective, like probably not until I started like going to school or like going to like, I don't know, spending more time at school, whenever that happens, that I realized the distinction between like, this stuff's for girls and this stuff's for boys. And I was like, oh, okay, better do boy stuff, like, duh. And then, but that was definitely, like, I never really put down, like, girl things in my life, or at least never stopped, like, seeing it all the time, like, in the house, sharing bathrooms with girls and stuff. I mean, like, femininity was just always around me in those ways, just from the family. And I think that had a big impact on how I viewed myself because of those things, just constantly being surrounded by women and stuff. And I did Boy Scouts, so that was like kind of like the antipodal, like other side of my experiences was like just you and the boys, and like that's how my dad and I spent most of our quality time growing up. Was that. And I enjoyed that stuff. I don't know. I think camping's great.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't think any of the experiences there that I valued were very inherently masculine in some of the ways that, like, I don't know, maybe making up a song like with your sisters and like dancing around isn't necessarily feminine either, but I don't know. Maybe that the fact that I view it that way is revealing.
So, tell me a little bit about like your upbringing and like social circumstances that kind of informed your understanding of queerness and femininity.
Okay. I went to a Christian Presbyterian...
Specifically pertaining to your identity, by the way.
Oh, okay.
I forgot to mention that part.
Okay. I went to like Christian preschool, like a private school. And then later I went to like public charter schools and then finally public high school.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to, like my social standing means necessarily.
I guess maybe like aspects of socialization. So maybe like, were you religious at all, or like did going to a Christian school like sort of influence your personal like morality or like values, religious values, stuff like that?
Okay. Sorry, this is...
You can take a second to think about it.
Yeah. We grew up very vaguely religious in the way that I think a lot of like, I don't know, middle class white families, that definitely in Orlando did, where like, I don't know, we went to church. We were never really like sold this big message about like Jesus or like morality any more than like, I don't know, our parents would be like, don't do drugs and stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of, I think certain things because definitely, okay, I think I gained a perspective on things like homosexuality or like queerness early on because our church used to be more relaxed with it. And then at a certain point, they like fired their like kind of unspoken lesbian Miss Carol, who was awesome. And like everyone loved her. They fired her. And that was like a little bit controversial. And then like it was a couple years after that I think we left. But that was kind of my first introduction is like
Did you know that she was queer? And then
Um,
that's why she was let go?
I was so young, I didn't care. Like,
Right.
I had not like thought about
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
right.
Really didn't know like what that was until like there's this thing no one was talking about. So I think that was how I was like introduced to queerness. Oh, this fell
That's all right.
into
I've been looking at
my
We're all
breasts.
good. Yeah.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about, like, was queerness discussed in your youth? How was it talked about?
It was,
If it was talked about?
if it was talked about, it was something like the adults were joking about or alluding to. So almost never like explicitly or directly addressed, unless it was something very dismissive was anything that we heard about, like, oh well, don't worry about that, that's just stuff that's different from us, you know, if like we overheard something as kids. So I'm being vaguer because I don't exactly remember what my like first.
No, that's fair. That's completely
Yeah.
fair.
Okay.
No worries about that. How would you say your conception of femininity has changed over the years?
Okay. Yeah. I think that it started with like, I guess when you're a kid you don't really like know either way, and at some point it becomes like, oh well, there's boys and there's girls, and like the boys hate the girls, and like that's like little kids, and then at some point you learn about feminism and you're like, you know what, maybe girls can be cool. It's kind of like that phase, and then you get to high school, and I feel like most of what I am like, what's coming to mind, like being socialized a male and like how women pertain to me as far as like what society was expecting to me is as far as like romantically, like those sorts of relationships. Now, in spite of this, I've always had like girls as like my best friends and stuff. Like, I don't know. I think the earliest notion of sorry, going back to a question, I guess a little bit, is like queerness in general is like, for me, was like the other kids calling me gay and me being like, what are you talking about? I'm not gay. Meanwhile, I was like just a trans lesbian, which is, so, you know, it's like,
it adds to the confusion.
Because like all my friends were girls growing up and stuff, or at least most of the time. And I had like my boyfriends too, and things like that. But I don't know. I lost the plot.
Okay.
If I could just interject real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Back to like the socialization aspect, were there any like institutions or like safe spaces that you identified as being like once you acknowledged your queerness, or like once you came to understand who you are as a person, like are there any like safe havens that you found, or any people besides like, for example, Miss Carol, like anyone like that? Okay,
yeah. It took me a really long time to accept my queerness and like talk about it or be out with it. Like I was always like vaguely bisexual, but no one talked about it in like all high school, middle school. But yes, there's the I mean, it's the big one. It's theater. That's like where the gay kids go in high school. And I knew that I didn't have the expectations of maleness that made me uncomfortable when I was there, or at least not as many. Like a more, you know, I could be closer to what I was comfortable with just based off like my mind and things, and what was easier to like sort of mask. So definitely that is a place that like I found like early in middle school, and then I just did that for all of middle school and high school. It was a very safe place. It's like basically all I did.
How about like after high school, like in college?
In college, well, that's like the reins are off now.
Yeah.
I can just do whatever I want. So I didn't need theater anymore. And I knew that like pretty immediately once I got to college. I was like, oh, I don't like want to do that anymore. I don't like really enjoy doing that stuff so much as like just like being in it, you know? And I think that part of that was like I could just be myself. I'm living on my own. And it was a pretty short amount of time after college that I eventually then came out as a trans woman, which is something that I had been aware of in my mind since like middle school. It was like, oh, I'm a girl. And like there's a few things that helped me realize that. But then it was like looking at the world around me, it's like, nope, though, like that's not like the route I want to take, especially in middle school when like my ideas about like queerness were still pretty like mixed up as far as like all I saw of like trans people were like cringe trans things online, you know what I mean? And this is like at the same time that I was also on Tumblr, so I was being that, and then like also like terrified of it. So like obviously the cognitive dissonance there was pretty strong. So it was until college where it's like, no, like so many of those stupid social things like don't matter because it's just you and your like 6 friends. And eventually got to the point where I felt safe enough with my friends to start coming out to them. And then it came to a point where eventually I came out to my family, and then I came out to the world, and now I'm this.
That's lovely. So you brought up something pretty interesting. You said that the internet had kind of formed your opinions on queerness and like trans people. Could you talk a little bit more about like how the internet impacted like your perceptions of queerness or your perceptions of femininity in general?
Yeah. That's our generation.
Yeah.
We were like raised on the internet. I was definitely on the internet at a time, like no restrictions on there. I had no restrictions. I could just spend all day on whatever.
Yeah.
So, and that meant like really early access to porn.
Yeah.
Which was, that doesn't develop a super healthy perspective on femininity. And like, internet, like, especially where like, it's like a propaganda thing, I think. But whatever it is that like we get shown like the worst of everything on the internet. So I would see like, social justice warrior gets, and like today I think it's much more sensationalized. But I think even back then you had this notion of like liberals being like these annoying people.
Yeah.
But then I'd meet friends in real life that were queer and I'd be like, oh wait, these people rock.
Yeah.
So I think it was a balance between like going out to the wild internet that just had like the craziest stuff, definitely stuff that like an 11-year-old didn't need to be seeing.
Right.
And then going back to real life and like being more grounded in things. And I think that I found my identity in the latter.
Yeah.
And nowadays the internet plays a very different role because like
right, absolutely.
it's especially I think just the way things have gone now too, like I get recommended like positive views of queer people instead of negative ones because that's what I want to see. When I'm sad, I go look at pretty trans girls on my phone.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a very different role.
So it's changed
peaceful.
A lot.
I think that's changed. And then like my relationship to the internet as I changed my media consumption habits.
Definitely. That'll do it. You said something about how at a certain age you realized that there was a separation between the genders and that there were certain masculine traits and certain feminine traits. What would you say are the difference between what is masculine, what is feminine? Is there a difference? Does that exist, or is that just entirely socially constructed?
This is one of those good questions.
You can think about it.
Because, clearly I feel some way about it, you know, there are a lot of trans people who will say things like gender's a social construct, or gender doesn't exist. You'll just hear those. Right. And it's like, well, clearly it does something because I'm doing a lot here. I think that, to me, as best as I can understand it, it's like a feeling. It's visceral. And my journey on life is going to be figuring out what exactly that is. So it's something we're constantly taking in. And I think that it's something that is present and inherent to so many minuscule things, you know, like a pipe can either be like a smoking pipe. I don't know why that's coming to mind, but a big curly one that's 1800 style, right? That could be very masculine, or it can be even just the same pipe. If you look at it right, or if you if someone's smoking the right way, it could be no, that pipe's a girl. You know, I think so. I think it's exactly as arbitrary as something that's just a construct, but I think because we feel it, it's also kind of
still tangible, even though it's something that we've kind of constructed. It's still tangible.
Yeah, I think that was probably the worst explanation of that.
No, that was great.
I understand. It's real in its consequences.
Yeah, I guess so. And we're just here. Yeah. We just exist and move through. I think in order to trans yourself, in order to transition, you have to like
have some conception.
Well, you have to you just throw out your conception first and say like, whatever this is that I'm feeling, like whatever I think femininity is, like I just actually have to forget it. Because whether or not I'm able to like define it or not, like that's all the walls that have been put up to stop you from experiencing it. Like society is really concerned on like maintaining masculine over femininity and like separating those and like the dynamic of like power between those.
Right.
And I think that informs, like as a social construct, is explaining how that information and like that status quo is so important, that we have walls up in the first place to be like, this is feminine, and that like it's bad because it's feminine. Like we don't like a man with a high voice because that means he's weak, because feminine is weak. Like those sorts of concepts are just everywhere. And I think that part of like transitioning, that like beautiful cosmic journey, which is not easy to uphold all the time, is taking and being like, oh, it's like stupid. I just need to forget that and start like living life. And now I can, spiking in the rain, feminine. I don't know. It was today.
That's so beautiful.
That's lovely. Biking can be feminine.
I guess so.
Depends on the bike.
Yeah. Depends on the biker.
Yeah, depends on the
Depends
biker.
on the rain.
Depends on the rain.
Yeah.
How would you say, that your relationship with like traditional conceptions of femininity helped or hindered you coming to terms with your identity?
I think it definitely hindered me coming to terms, the sort of traditional view I had on men versus women. And I think it still does. Like, if down to some really basic things, just like body dysmorphia comes from, I think those things, like I see my face and I'm like, I do a lot to cover up, say, like my shadow, But at the end of the day, like, what is it that tells me women can't have beards? Like, sure they can,
exactly.
And that's like a higher level sort of thing that a lot of people wouldn't get if you can't break out of those initial conceptions. But at the same time, it does inform me in ways like I like having girly music on. And I don't know what girly means here, but I like girly EDM music when I do my makeup. And that comes from some of my like, and this is very like white, like, our version of traditional femininity, like in the 2000s, growing up with sisters and like listening to music and doing makeup, like that to me is helpful on my transition, because I can indulge in something like that and know, because of what I know, that it's going to make me feel good.
So like modern conceptions of femininity have helped you, but like more traditional conceptions.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's because they're modern that it's helping me, but I just think that whatever you have in your head, like, you can use the things that used to hold you back to kind of push you forward. If there's something that gives you insecurity, there's a good chance that you can like find the heart of it and find some other way that actually boosts your confidence. Is I guess how I feel.
Yeah, it's just about like channeling it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like if you use it to channel to like, if you're informed by all these traditional views and you're using those to criticize yourself, like, you're going to feel horrible. But if you're aware of those traditional views and you go like, oh yeah, that is fun girl stuff, let's do it, then like, you're going to have a good day.
So here's a kind of more difficult question.
Okay.
Have you faced, if you have, tell us a little bit about like marginalization in the Florida community or within the queer community, so in a smaller way.
Within the queer community.
So talk about it broadly within the Florida community, and then if there was any marginalization within the queer community, you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Okay.
And if you haven't had any, then that's perfectly fine answer as well.
I have. I'm just thinking about how I want to go at it.
Kind of.
I think the most often way it happens is just in social interactions where you get misgendered or you get otherwise just disrespected by people. And that can be on varying levels of like intensity. I've had some like, a car drives by and they call me the F slur, like in broad daylight. And it's like, come on. Or it can be at the bar and I have some guy, I bartend and I could be bartending and have someone come up to me. I've hidden this again. Okay. I might be bartending and someone comes to the bar and I've been helping them and they just keep serving like misgendering or just like, yeah, dude, bro, like, or even just coming to the bar and talking to me being uncomfortable, like visibly, and it's like awkward and I have to deal with that. And it's like, it's kind of just someone else acting a little bit, I don't know, a little bit stupid. And it's like, I shouldn't have to deal with this. You know what I mean? That's one thing. There's kind of a step before that, which is like, before I even leave the door, I have to be asking myself, like, how much do I care about passing today? Or am I going to go out looking like a boy? And like, if I look like a boy in Florida, I'm probably not going to use the women's restroom, for example. And that's something that can be stressful. And these are like a lot of little things, but they're everyday considerations. And then sometimes it's bigger things. So I used to be a tutor. I worked at a tutoring service here in Gainesville, and it was with children. So I had children like 3rd grade to like 10th grade was about what I taught. And I was really good at it. And everyone at the workplace was as respectful as they could be, Still got misgendered a lot because they weren't used to getting around with trans people necessarily, but I would get assured time and time again about like, we want to make this like a good place for you to work, da-da-da. But in the end, I was like super mysteriously fired after doing like a really good job having great students for like noise complaints at my table when I did not have a noisy table. The other teachers could tell you that. Wow. And this was after a sort of series of just like negative interactions with some parents where they would like find out and then like I would just like stop getting kids into my table. And I would be like, well, I know what happened there. Or someone would like explain to me, someone would tell me sometimes. But I think that, and there was also some stuff there, like normal job stuff of like, and also our boss was like a crazy lady who's also took some embezzlement, like other things, you know what I mean? Like, like just like a normal level of like the general unfairness of life. But then there's this added context. Like I didn't just get fired, I got like trans fired. Yeah. Which is, and like, I did just get fired. Like all this happens. I lost that job and now I do a different job, but it's fine. But there is this like context to everything that happens, especially in, say, a workplace or any of these social things, right? I mean, the things we operate under our contract for, right? Like those things are kind of constantly peppered with little aggravations, I think.
Little microaggressions.
Yeah.
And definitely things like that too. Yeah.
So
I can say more too on this.
Oh, go for it.
I actually have like loads.
So, no, keep going.
Great. I'm also a musician.
Right.
And so I've spent a lot of time playing shows, and that's a very specific, like the entertainment industry can be so many things. I've played with some bands, and it's the bands that are more like punk rock, a little more alternative, maybe, where we go out and do shows, and it's a great time, and people in general will be very respectful of me. Sometimes they're not, that's just life. And then I've played with bands that have a much more traditionally acceptable sound, a little bit cleaner, and they play things like the 30A Songwriter Festival, which if you didn't know, it's just a bunch of really rich people paying to hear a bunch of like Nashville-style songwriters. And it's, in my opinion, super cheap. I do not like it. And like it has some good songwriters, Jeff Tweedy, like all these like big names or whatever. But the clientele was very rich, very conservative type. And I felt very uncomfortable that entire weekend. Yeah. And I had trouble explaining this to cis white male bandmates who didn't quite understand why that experience was anything but like totally awesome. Because it's like, oh, we had a hotel, like pay for like, oh my God, all these cool things. And that was fun. But there's just a level of like fear for safety that comes in. Even just traveling on the road, you stop in at like a gas station in the middle of nowhere, especially here in Florida.
Yeah.
That can be scary. Am I already dressed up for the show? Because that means that like I'm making an attempt to pass and I don't pass. Like, I just know that from my life. Like, so you're running a lot of risks with like attempting to exist the way that you do. I should stop saying you and start saying I. That's my therapist says. I end up frequently, because of what is just asked of me for the normal things you do with live music, to put myself in situations where I feel like I'm at risk. Sometimes it's even just like, oh, I'm going to walk alone out from the venue to my car because I had to drive separate to the venue. And now I'm like walking down this like kind of unfriendly street of like venues and bars and such, like alone with a piece of expensive equipment. And I think because I'm trans, I'm at like a high risk for violence there. And that's freaky and not something that many of like my male, fellow musicians like think about.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to be with.
Would you say that like the sort of shift in the political sphere of Florida has had an impact on your feeling of safety?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get out of here as like soon as possible.
Yeah, you don't plan on staying.
No. Yeah.
So, kind of shifting gears, do you have what are your thoughts about like the sort of like butch femme dichotomy of like lesbian relationships? How does it play into like queer relationships?
Okay. I'm trying not to just talk about my ex because that's what this is getting in danger of. But I do have some things coming to mind.
Yeah, no.
So something that I struggle with, this is just my personal journey in relationships. But with being trans, I am very much, how do you say this? I don't want to be the masculine role at any point in the relationship, And so I'm constantly trying to like push out of that. And when you're dating, when you're dating a lesbian, it's one thing because they hopefully see you as a woman.
Yeah.
Which is also, that's like an issue with queer dating, is you never know. But when you're dating someone who, I think my experience is that I was constantly afraid of being like given that masculine role. That's why all my relationships in high school when I was in the closet sucked.
Yeah.
Is because I was very frustrated and had a lot of resentment because my girlfriend kept wanting me to do boy things. I'd be like, I don't want to do that. That stuff is lame. The things that I viewed as like the traditionally masculine role. And now that I'm out, I've only been in one relationship as an out trans woman. And that anxiety is still present, even if it's not, even if it's for no good reason, basically. I think this is why a lot of trans women just date other trans women.
Right.
It's because there's a certain like security in that. I guess I'm pretty far away from the topic of butch versus femme.
No, but I think you're getting down to like some really important, conversations that we want to have.
Okay.
Yeah. Just like the gendered aspect of queer relationships. Like how do you like, what? Oh, okay. How do you like sort of deal with that? Like, is that, you say that you don't want to take on like the more masculine role, and that anxiety definitely exists for you, and it's kind of going back to like the social construct of gender and it being real and its consequences. And so, can you think of other examples in which you see like queerness and femininity manifest sort of like together in your life, and like how does that create like anxieties?
Okay.
That was poorly put. I'm so sorry.
No. It's not. You're good. I'm thinking, I think something that comes to mind, like, easy to grasp is, like, any meme you see online about, like, the boys versus the girls, or, like, how a boy, as according to, like, our internet culture, I don't know, whatever the monoculture of our Gen Z stuff is, like, how should a boy be viewing his girlfriend? How should a girl be viewing her boyfriend, right? And, like, yeah, definitely lesbian relationships aren't, you know, safe from that. Like the, you know, who's the man in a relationship thing, which, of course, there's relationships that aren't like that, like two femmes or two, I don't know, like butch or two masculine lesbians. But those sorts of things just, they pop up all the time. I'm thinking, like, I like getting driven around. I don't really want to have to drive. I mean, this is, like, funny. It's, like, seems silly because that's, like, and there's nothing, like, necessarily masculine about driving or feminine about driving, but it's one of those things in a relationship. My most recent partner would always be sure to, like, open the door for me, which was super sweet. And that was also, like, so she was butch. She liked doing the masculine things, which is always funny because it's like that's the social thing that, like, supposedly we're throwing away or whatever, but we still like it. And I think maybe that's what I meant by, like, you can take the things that make you insecure, and there's always, like, a flip side that can also kind of be affirming and nice. So I think that I'm so glad that there are mask lesbians out there.
Would you say that you hold a positive relationship with femininity? And has it always been that way? Or has it changed over time?
I think that for a really long time I had a very distant relationship with femininity because I was, like, pushing it away as much as I could.
Yeah.
But I also wasn't really pulling masculinity any closer. Like, sometimes, you know, you do this kind of desperate grasps for, like, oh, I'm going to grow a mustache. I'm going to do something to get people off the, you know, the trail. But mostly you're kind of just pushing everything away, very empty. So I think that after having some of those initial realizations of, like, oh no, I'm a girl on the inside, left a sort of emptiness. Now I think I'm, like, constantly trying to reach out and, like, find it in ways. Like, it took me a really long time to build up, like, more of a routine with, like, getting dressed specifically, or, like, voice training. Guys, voice training is so hard. It is so hard. And not because it's hard to do things with your voice. Like, I'm a singer. I do funny voices all the time. Like, that's been my whole thing since, like, middle school. But getting the courage to, like, do those things with your voice in a conversation with someone else, where you're trying to, like, get your thoughts across, you know, that takes effort. And it's, you know, like, oh, why does it take effort if that's, like, your real voice? Like, you get those, I can hear the criticisms, you know, and I'm doing this because they're, like, little voices.
I gotcha.
I don't know how you'll transcribe that.
well, luckily we have a video, but transcriber put in little voices in the background.
I think that those criticisms are there, and, like, they're kind of constantly pulling you back into the emptiness, or they always are pulling me. Honestly, it's a lot harder to say if you are talking about yourself. There's a lot that keeps me from, like, diving all the way in. I think I could be a lot closer, and my relationship could then be more positive with it. And yeah, there's times where I even feel scorned, and that my relationship with femininity is negative. Like, if you're feeling body dysmorphia, you know, it's like, it can feel like this, like, grander sense of femininity is, like, rejecting you. And it's like, it's so shameful, and so it's very painful. It's kind of thing to just, like, be standing in front of a mirror. It's like, oh gosh. But then other times you find, like, the right shirt and right skirt, and it feels, I don't know, I've definitely had these moments where it feels like femininity is accepting me. And I've had those moments for a very long time. Those things, there's probably people who are more well-versed in, like, queer language for these things, I have a word for this, because it is such a specific feeling of, and it goes back to like middle school. This is how I know I'm trans, of doing something and like seeing myself, and I feel like I'm being like enveloped and accepted as by femininity, more than me accepting femininity. And that's something that I've heard people discuss in like online discourse and things like that, or in songs by trans women. But that feeling, those
Yeah, it's
moments,
like gender euphoria. Like the
gender
opposite of-
euphoria. Yeah, I guess that is what we use.
I think that's it.
Yeah. But it's like, I don't even like that term. I don't think
I
it
don't like it
describes
either.
it. It's like a thing that happens to me. It's a
Yeah.
moment that I have. And I've had it like beginning of college. First time one of my friends like did my makeup. And I was like in like a skirt or something. And I like I still have the pictures. And I was looking at them today actually, just by happenstance. But I remember feeling it so strongly there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I almost started crying, you know? And I had a mustache at the time. So clearly this sense is like universal and transcends so many more things. And it's also not like binary, I think. You know, it's like a lot of things can happen at once.
Yeah, that is so beautiful.
That was lovely.
You described that so well, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, the next question was, can you recall a specific moment in which you felt truly comfortable with your gender expression? So I guess you kind of answered that. Do you want to talk more about that?
I don't think we're ever supposed to be like comfortable with expression. I think to express is to get uncomfortable, like jostle it up. You know, you gotta take whatever's inside of you and kind of like swivel it around, see what comes up floating, like snow globe. And I don't think snow globes at their most comfortable are just down and all the snow's fallen, right? So I don't think comfortable with my femininity is something I ever really want to achieve. If I'm seeking like an artistic and expressive way of living. Now, sometimes I do just want to like chill out on the couch, and I'm not voice training then, you know, like my roommates know exactly how boyish I could be, you know, and that's like relaxing. I think like, I don't know, I guess maybe I do want to be more feminine when I'm relaxed.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's worthwhile to seek to like change myself in that way. You know, it's like, that's just however I am is how I am, you know?
What are your thoughts on current LGBTQ like social justice movements? Have you participated in any like protests? Would you share your experiences of those social movements if you have?
Yeah. The stuff that comes to mind immediately is like GSA organizations, right? Gay Straight Alliance, or things like that is like, I don't know, that's just coming to mind. I think that stuff's great.
Yeah.
I think it's very good that there's like teachers out there, especially, or anyone that is willing to accept the youthful queers. I think that's great. And then I think when you grow up, I think it just is art communities, basically, which maybe that's because all society has like left for us. Like no workplace is, I think, effectively doing queer outreach, right? Every time I apply to a job and it has a little blurb about like, we like gay people, I'm always like, shut up. I'm not buying it. But what society does still have space for is like how we use our leisure time, and that is art, and art is where all the queers are. So I think like that's like the adult version of like GSA or anything else, is you find your like-minded queers and just find the things you enjoy doing together, you know? Queer hiking groups, queer musicians, so many trans women make music. So I think that those are kind of what you end up with. I don't know, I'm still
You found like a lot of community within like the music scene.
And what that community is, it just becomes your friends. It's like, oh yeah, I just meet with so and so every Thursday, you know, like whatever things you start doing, or like, yeah, for music it's going to shows, and then just every show is just a bunch of queer people meeting up. So it's community in this kind of very loose sense of, you know, no one's signing up for anything, no one's paying club dues or whatever. And I think that's that's been, and I don't have a lot of experience with like protests or anything. A lot of like more active like social justice outside of social justice at shows, which is like, oh, we're raising money for this, or like just saying stuff on stage to like hype people up behind a common cause, and things like that. And it's no wonder that a lot of, you know, like my friends in the scene basically also do protests, and then they'll invite me out to protests, and every now and then I show up.
Are you optimistic about LGBTQ freedoms and like the upholding of those freedoms in the current or future political climate? You optimistic or you may be fearful?
I mean, things don't look great.
Yeah.
There's a lot of scary things on TV and stuff. I think even 400 years ago, there is trans women out doing it. You know what I mean? So we'll probably be fine.
Is there anything that you would like to add about like your relationship with femininity and queerness? Any stories you want to tell just for the record?
I can try and think.
Yeah, take a moment.
I had something.
No, go for it.
Okay. This is, I don't know if this is at all, and you can stop me if it's just totally relevant to something that came to mind. So a lot of trans women make music. A lot of trans women make a very specific genre of music called hyperpop. I don't know if this is a social phenomenon you're aware of. It's really funny because I did not really like EDM music, even just like the style of vocals there, which is not exclusive to like music made by trans women. But it is very helpful for trans women because, you know, you get to modulate your voice, and isn't that exciting? It's like, ooh, I sound like a girl. It's so fascinating because I don't know what it is, but there's something. I think it might just be that we're all doing it, so we're all excited by it. Is seeing other trans women make this music that's like kind of batshit crazy, and like sometimes we're like really good. Like if you know like music stuff, it has like a lot like I was looking for a word and totally lost it.
Valuable?
No, I mean like the ratio of like, so like every genre has, it's like, oh, I learn everything by ear, or like oh, I'm like a music theory nerd, and like I'll like do composition, or like, oh, I don't know, I just, you know, the guitarist tells me what notes to play. So like that, there's so many like really highly like musically fluent musicians that make hyperpop, and it's so funny because they will do like crazy things that show off, if not a lot of like knowledge, then like a lot of ears. Like, I don't know, good. I'm not explaining this right, but it's funny because then they're making like meme music sometimes, like songs about like a funny monkey or something, like very silly. And I think that like there's this sense of abandon like shared in the genre that I think comes from the sense of abandonment you have to have about life, or that a lot of trans people feel like you have to have in order to start like accepting yourself as trans. Because like if you look at like, I don't know, like cringe funny internet stuff from like raw XD, right? Or like trans women love the emoticon like :3.
Yes.
I don't know why that like resonates so much, but I think it's because it's like taking this thing that could be like potentially kind of embarrassing, right? Like especially if you're like a masculine guy and someone finds out you have like an aesthetic Tumblr page, you know what I mean? Like that's right, but it's instead being like, actually, I love that stuff. Let's just do it. And I think you get there too, like I don't know, like furries in this space, you know, like the more extreme side of like what we see as socially acceptable in this world. And it makes sense to me, like why so many people flock there, like on the internet, and then towards this like crazy music, and then at the heart of it you find just so many trans people. I don't know, it's very, that to me is interesting. I don't know if I ever had a point in bringing it up, but that's been
that was really insightful.
Okay.
Is there like an element of like reclamation to it, just like kind of asserting your that you have a space and like sort of making like this is so like cliche, but just like let me be perfectly queer, just like let me be like out in myself and just like cultivating a space if no one else will do it for you, just sort of like making sure that you are seen.
Yeah, I like that. Let me be perfectly queer. I think it's this exact same abandonist, like hedonistic attitude of like 90s, like pop grunge, crazy stuff. Like, yeah, they're gonna think you're weird anyways. You might as well get all the crazy piercings, weird hair, crazy colors. Cause like they don't want you there anyways. You know, like conforming was never the point.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's reclamation for sure.
Okay. And I guess to that end, sort of, we use the word queer a lot in this sort of like discourse and study and whatnot. What do you think about like the reclamation of that word? Do you like appreciate the use of that word? What does that mean to you? Like, especially because I know from that it's been sort of like adopted as like a just reclaimed by the queer community. Once used as like a derogatory term, but just now.
Yeah. Well, now it feels like so dry almost.
Okay.
Like queer is not, it's fun to say queer, but it's becomes just a word that means it's almost like a politically correct way to refer to just like the gays, whatever you mean, you know, because you're talking about lesbians, you're talking about all the trans identities. Like the people who have no idea what's going on, but are like, I don't know, at least I'm queer. Like I had a friend who would never say if she was like trans or like really even like gay or bisexual or pansexual. Didn't like any of those, but would be like, yeah, queer. That works for me.
Yeah.
Which has made it a little bit stiff. Like it's less, you know, it's definitely not as useful as an insult unless you're like, you know, a 50-year-old white guy,
Right.
you know? I love the words that we reclaimed. I have a lot of fun calling my friends the F slur.
Yeah.
I just like, I think that stuff's great. I don't know. And some people don't. Some people, like I have friends who are like, I won't say the F slur, and they have some reason. I don't know. I think it's fun because, you know, if I can get called that walking down the street, you know, it feels a little bit better if I can also then take all the power out of the word and call my straight roommates every now and then just for fun. They never see it coming is the best part.
Let me see if we have any more questions.
Yeah, I think we've just about done it.
Cool.
You did so fantastic.
Thank you.
You did a great job. You look adorable.
Yes.
I can't wait for this to become a video. Was there anything else you want to share or talk about?
I don't know. I went out for the first time as a single woman.
Oh,
It was like last month now, but that was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
I went out with a bunch of my girlfriends for like the first time really, because I didn't go out a lot when I was in a relationship. And so it's a kind of new friend
it's pretty
group.
typical, yeah.
Yeah. I was really nervous. But I don't know. I got cute and I had fun. And I don't know if I have anything insightful to say about it, but it was
just that like going out to queer clubs and stuff. I assume that's what you did, right?
Yeah.
Like you see.
Hey. Yes, I went to UC. It was it's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
And the most fun part was getting ready, which
so true.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like a ritual, just like sort of just like
yes, ritual.
Okay.
I think like that is like, and I don't know, this is just my personal tendencies of like being a little bit spiritual and stuff, but like I love anything that I can take and sect to my brain as a ritual. And like, the ritual of getting ready is feminine in its energy.
Absolutely.
And it's like, it feels like the universe has like a feminine side to it. And that's what you're like breathing.
1,000%.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was what I was getting from what you were saying.
I suppose it has a masculine side too, if you're into that, you know. I don't know.
if it has to, you know.
Yeah.
All right. So then I suppose that's it for the video.
Okay.